the Anaretic degree. For those who don't know what it is, it's the final degree of a sign before it ingresses or moves to the next sign. Sometimes the Anaretic degree will be void. In other words, not making any aspects to any other planets. Or sometimes it won't be, especially if you happen to be a person who has planets at 29 degrees in their horoscope, which is interesting because until they finish that last Ptolemaic aspect, it won't be void. Now, there is another point, though, and this is another one of those little gems. I mean, I have this little book. This lady, Helen Adams Garrett, was lecturing to AFA way back when. I think probably I went to a conference late 70s, I think it was, maybe 80. And she and her husband, I can't remember her husband's name, they were astrologers this lady was older, had been doing this forever. You know, one of the things about the older astrologers is they were really interesting people and they were totally unique. And she was unique. And she wrote a lot of little books that she would mimeograph and staple together. And I bought those books when I was there. And I remember her giving a lecture on the Anaretic degree. And she said it beautifully. She said, let's do a story, she said. Think about a fluffy, little, beautiful puppy who's frisky and excited to go on an adventure. And it's clean, it's brushed, white, maybe white fur, very plumy. And she said, now this little puppy is going to start going on a little journey. And this puppy suddenly comes to a cornfield, a muddy swamp, a forest, and is traveling through all these different places. And as this puppy is going through all these different places, his fur, which was clean, is becoming embedded with mud and dirt and burrs and foxtails and you name it. So that by the time the puppy finishes the journey, the puppy is so heavy with mud and grasses, and he's not that big a puppy either, but his tail is even heavier now because it collected everything as it was passing through. So now the tail of the puppy is wagging the dog. There is a phrase in English called the tail that wags the dog. In other words, the dog has no control over the tail has control over the dog. Now, this is actually what the 29th degree is about. This is how she explained it to me. For the tail to wag the dog, then and now, indicates the 29th degree, let's just say that, indicates a backwards situation or a small or unimportant entity, which is the tail, is controlling a bigger, more important one, the dog. Now, I apologize for this because I'm an American. I didn't look up any articles in Mexican newspapers going back referring to tail that wags the dog. But on the left is a political cartoon from 1891 where the Secretary of State was running President Harrison's campaign. And so here we see, let's see, here it is. Here's President Harrison, and here is the Secretary of State who is running the show. Going a little before that, right after the Civil War in the United States, there was an article about President Grant, who Ulysses S. Grant was the one that won the Union Army. He headed the Union Army, and he became president after the Civil War. And this article was written, "A muddy-headed man writing on finance is nearly as deplorable an object as a man who cannot swim, struggling in water beyond his depth." The president, referring to President Grant, in his message, thus delivers himself upon the tax and tariff questions. President Grant, who knew nothing about tariffs at that time, had applied the tariffs and the taxes to the wrong things.